It is summer 974, and in the crowded, lofty environs of Magdeburg Cathedral, Otto I, Holy Roman Emperor, and the most powerful man in Europe since Charlemagne, has lain dead for almost a year. The son who bears his name has reigned from the day after his father's passing, a mark of the senior Otto's organization and foreplanning. Outside the calm of the Holy House and the borders of Otto's realm, however, there are those who wish to test the strength of the new emperor. Ambitious and ruthless men whose respect can only be found at the end of the sword. Chief among these challengers is Harald Bluetooth, King of Denmark and Norway, who along with his own now deceased father, has chafed under the suzerainty of the Saxons for more than 2 decades. The Bluetooth spent the late part of the previous year and the early months of the new corralling his bannermen and gathering his forces, and now he launches an invasion of Otto's Saxon heartland in the warm months of 974. The Bluetooth's host brings fire, death, and pillage, ransacking the holy houses of the church that Otto the Great had forced them to accept, and carrying off imperial subjects as slaves. Compelled to act lest he lose his sovereign authority, Otto launches a counterattack to repel the invaders, but the momentum and numbers of Harald's Danish-Norwegian alliance fling him away like an unstoppable wave of gleeful fury, scattering the Ottonian forces like 9 pins. But Otto II does not despair, nor does he acquiesce to the berserker menace. Instead, he digs deep into the administration and reserves put in place by his father, rebuilding his army and waiting his moment. It comes when the seasons change and the Bluetooth's Norwegian allies return to their homelands, more than pleased with their stores of booty and treasure. Otto rides up through the land of his forefathers, forcing Bluetooth to retreat in the face of the now immense imperial host, until the Danes cross the border of their own kingdom, and Harald is compelled to make a stand lest he too lose his right to hold the throne from invaders. When the battle comes at the Dannevirke, axe, sword, spear and bow make no allowances for those they strike, and in a battle marked by furiousness, it is the army of Otto, the army forged by his father over decades, that makes the difference, storming the earthworks and ditches, and raining blows on the Danish host that had dared contaminate the land of the king of the Romans. But in a demonstration of might, toughness, and sturdiness, the Danes fight on, holding their ground, protecting the land of their ancestors. The Bluetooth screams a blood oath, shouting his men forward, rallying them for the most unlikely of victories. For a time he believes that it will be possible. One more swing of the axe or throw of a spear will break the spirit of the Imperials, and they will lose heart. Bluetooth will live in eternity. But just as he is readying himself for the final charge, a messenger pushes through the throng to address him. The army before them on the battlements is just a ruse. Otto has landed a strong force from the sea at their rear, and they will soon be surrounded. Harald Bluetooth lowers his axe. Shortly after, he kneels before the second Otto in submission. His realm is to remain a tributary, while the 10-year-old son he returns home to, Sweyn, who will one day come to be called Forkbeard, will be raised as a Christian, paying homage to the papal court Otto rules. The boy watches the return of the defeated army with an unmoving expression, but behind his eyes, thoughts swirl, and the men who are close enough to pay attention wonder what dark depths lie in wait for the kingdom when it is his time to take power. Sweyn Forkbeard, the man who would become the terror of many an Englishman during the later 10th and early 11th centuries, was born around 960 AD, the son of the aforementioned Harald Bluetooth and a woman who was likely of common stock. That a king like Harald Bluetooth would choose to marry and raise the son she bore as his heir indicates that she had an exceptional nature. Bluetooth and his family were not the first Christian converts in their native land, but it was during his reign that the faith firmly took hold over the still stoutly reverenced ancient pagan beliefs. For the Bluetooth, there was a dilemma in appeasing those of his subjects, particularly the nobles, who were intent on maintaining ancestral devotions to gods like Thor, Woden, and Fricko, and the benefits of adopting Catholicism, which brought with it ancillary advantages such as the clerical bureaucracy. This would in turn help to centralize power away from semi-independent nobles and bring in all important taxes. The Bluetooth was notably the first Danish king to mint coins for the whole nation. Above all, however, the Bluetooth's policies were decided with a mind to his southern neighbor, Otto, both the first and the second of their names. Denmark was a strong kingdom, but the land border it shared with the multinational imperial power made it a vulnerable peninsula in the event of conflict. Harald thus wisely avoided encroaching by land to the south. Mirroring the reign of his contemporary Brian Boru in Ireland, he campaigned tirelessly to subjugate numerous petty kingdoms on the Jutland Peninsula and the surrounding islands, eliminating competitors for spoils and establishing a uniform royal power. Proving himself more than an uncouth warlord, Bluetooth was also a builder, constructing ring forts to galvanize his rule, notably the extensive fortification at Trelleborg, complete with a bailey and space to shelter a force of 1,300 people. While these campaigns and fortifications were enough to subdue the petty kings of Denmark's fringes, and with the adoption of Christianity, the Danish kingdom took on the trappings and organizational capacity of a centralized feudal state, Harald's greatest threat would be his own son, Sweyn. Harald and Sweyn drew their ancestry from Gorm the Old, Harald's father, and Gorm himself was the son of semi-legendary Danish ruler Harthacnut, son of Sigurd Snake in the Eye. Snake in the Eye's father was Ragnar Lothbrok, a trailblazer of the early Viking age, in being one of the first to raid and terrorize the lands of England. Both Harald and Sweyn would have understood and esteemed the heritage and legacy that they had been bequeathed. But while Harald played the role of nation builder, Sweyn, the rebellious and impatient heir, drew himself fully into the role of seafaring raider and adventurer, the practice of which had brought about a renewed decline in England over the previous decades. Danish power there had peaked more than a century earlier, when the great heathen army under Guthrum and Ivar the Boneless, among others, conquered 3 of the 4 English kingdoms. But the kings of Wessex had resisted until in 927, Æthelstan declared a free and independent Kingdom of England after conquering the last Viking kingdom of York. Fighting between Danes and English continued on an even smaller scale and practically ceased altogether under the reign of Edgar the Peaceful from 959 to 975. It was Edgar's untimely death while still in his early 30s, and his son Ethelred's violent seizure of power after the murder of his older brother Edward, that gave the Danes an opening to resume raiding in the ensuing instability. Aged just 12, Ethelred was completely incapable of stemming the attacks or deterring the war bands that increased in frequency and ferocity with every passing season. In 991, a large fleet of dragon-headed longboats appeared on the coast at Folkestone, Kent, and proceeded to sail and raid unhindered to the Essex coast, where it defeated an overmatched but tenacious English force at the Battle of Maldon. Following this defeat, Ethelred was persuaded by Sigeric, Archbishop of Canterbury, to pay the horde a colossal £10,000 tribute. Alfred the Great had paid the Danes so that he could use the time bought to constructively erect fortifications, raise levies, and initiate a system of defense in case of attack. But Ethelred seems not to have been blessed with such dynamism, and appeasement without teeth merely led to more attacks. Right then, this one is brought to you by Manscaped, the global men's lifestyle brand that absolutely aces men's grooming needs. When you've got 10 million men worldwide trusting Manscaped, you know they produce some of the best hygiene tools for your family jewels. Say goodbye to the hairy mess in your groin area with the Champion Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. It has 2 interchangeable heads, one for a standard trim and the foil blade when you're in the mood for smooth. It also has LED lights, dual temperature features, and gets close up to the hardest to reach areas. And this thing is waterproof. You can use it in the bath or the shower without having to worry about the cleanup. Then you've got Manscaped's premium aftershave lotion and ball deodorant to top things off. But the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is not just about your balls. Once you've smoothened things down there, head north to get rid of those pesky nose and ear hairs with the Weed Whacker 2.0. Just like the lawnmower, the Weed Whacker is cordless, waterproof, and has skin-safe technology built in, so you know you're getting taken care of. To round things up, a nice compact bag comes with the package, making it the go-to travel companion for any man's grooming needs. Take it from my smooth and happy family jewels. When you know, you know. Head over to the link below to get 20% off plus free international shipping with the promo code HistoryMarche at manscaped.com. In 995, the Norse were back again, bearing down on London itself with a monstrous fleet of 100 ships. The battle took place on September 8th, the Nativity of St. Mary, and Ethelred and the people of London rallied while the Vikings put the city to siege, holding out until the attackers were forced into negotiation. The price of peace this time was £22,000 to £28,000, but the raid's leader, Olaf Tryggvason, went through the sacrament of confirmation in the aftermath and pledged himself to forswear attacking England from that point. The kingdom gained a small respite, but while it had appeased its Norse tormentors, there was another threat rising across the North Sea. Even in his younger years, Sweyn was known to have been colourful, charismatic, and popular among the people, in contrast to his sterner father, who was perhaps constrained in his conduct through realpolitik. Sweyn's formative years had been spent receiving a standard education for boys of his class, learning farm management, skills of war and seamanship, all of which would prove staples in his later career. Though Sweyn would almost certainly have enjoyed tales and songs of his ancestors' deeds, he would also have been acutely aware of the shifting religious and political dynamics dictated by having the powerful Otto the Great to the south of his father's domain. The Holy Roman Empire was a reality that could scarcely be ignored, the southern lands of the Jutland Peninsula being a contested area, with Otto's domain roughly corresponding to modern-day Germany, down to the northern parts of Italy. To offset any military designs Otto may have had on his own lands, Harald smartly converted to Christianity in 965, significantly offering Sweyn for baptism too. He was given the Christian name Otto. Harald further placated Otto by building churches in his realm, while also allowing missionaries from the Bremen region to speed on the conversion of the Danish populace. Harald's Christianizing efforts and the German acquisition of influential positions, even if only enacted through political necessity, were not universally embraced by the nobility and Danish people at large. Yet if Harald had on the surface pledged himself to the church at the cost of some domestic popularity, he certainly didn't allow this to blunt his military ambitions. In 970, he conquered the southeast of the modern nation of Norway, known as Viking. This region was placed under the stewardship of Håkon Sigurdsson, who ruled the province as Harald's vassal. In 973, Otto I died, leaving his equally militant son, Otto II, on the throne of the Holy Roman Empire. Sensing an opportunity, Harald took a chance and moved into Saxony. Undeterred, Otto II met the Danish king's forces at the Danework, or Dannevirke, which were a series of walls and trenches stretching along the neck of the Cimbrian peninsula. Though Otto could not smash directly through the fortifications, he did keep up a frontal attack to distract Harald's men long enough to enable a separate landing to the north. This fresh ambush spelling defeat and the loss of Hedeby, a rich town and hub of regional trade. Harald's loss was significant, given its wider implications. He would eventually reclaim the lost territories in 983, but in the meantime, his own reputation was severely compromised, and the prospects of Sweyn strengthened. Just as Otto I had struggled with the ambitions of his sons and brothers, Harald and Sweyn's relationship was distinctly cold and distant. Sweyn did not allow his Christian baptism to deter him from the traditional life of a marauding plunderer. His early raids achieved little, though the advantages of a compromised England remained in place. Still plentiful with money but lacking power, England's long coastline was difficult to effectively defend, and in addition to the multitude of targets along its coast, Sweyn was bolstered by a wide range of support bases, utilizing Viking settlements in Ireland, like Dublin, as well as Norman France. His relationship with Harald remained strained due to personality differences. Meanwhile, Harald suffered a further setback in 974, when Håkon Sigurdsson, his regent in Norway, became alienated and began to rule separately from Harald's realm. Håkon, like many of Harald's subjects closer to home, was an adherent of the old gods, and he was compelled as part of the peace with Otto to reject the Norse gods in favor of the Christian god. To rub salt into this bitter wound, after loyally moving south with Harald, Håkon had also been forced to ferry German missionaries back north with him to begin mass conversions of his subjects. He suitably feigned acceptance to regain direct control of Vik before renouncing both Harald and his enforced religion, sending the missionaries out of his domain and standing defiant on the shore of the Skagerrak Narrows. This de facto loss of Norway, as well as its revenues, compounded the mounting pressure coming from Otto and the Holy Roman Empire, but it was Harald's son Sweyn who would prove the catalyst for Harald's final fall. The tense relationship between the two was unfortunate, as Sweyn's undoubted ability would almost certainly have proven an asset to Harald in his hard-pressed circumstances. It was said that Sweyn was universally loved by all, except for one person, his own father Harald, who apparently hated the boy. Such a popular and capable heir could prove a lightning rod for the large number of nobles who were discontented with Harald's policies and failed campaigns. In an attempt to put some distance between Sweyn and his subjects, as well as prepare him for eventual accession to the throne, Harald sent Sweyn to the famed Joms Vikings under their chieftain Palnatoki on the island of Finn. The Joms Vikings had a storied and menacing reputation as warriors and mercenaries, and they were highly dedicated to the worship of the old gods. Even still, both they and Harald were happy to exchange payment for educating the heir of the throne in their deadly services. Only the most elite personnel were assessed by the fraternity, and a minority of this grouping chosen were subsequently expected to adhere to a code of conduct matching that of later exclusive orders, such as the Knights Templar and the Assassins. Such a monastic routine in his formative years would have hammered the already imposing teenage prince into a proficient, accomplished, and versatile killing machine, while also developing the tactical savvy and seafaring acumen that would see him rise over the multitude of pretenders and threats then facing his embattled father. With their arcane rituals, worship of war gods, and fiercely held autonomy, the Vikings would also have instilled in Sweyn an indelibly ringing counterpoint to the ever-growing Christian influence and sycophants at his father's court. For his part, Sweyn proved himself worthy of admittance to the order, but a permanent stay with the Vikings and adoption of their way of life was out of the question, even had Sweyn desired it. It was around this time that Sweyn took the moniker by which he would be known to history, as he left Yom's base at Finn to return to his homeland. Forkbeard, in keeping with the Old Norse habit of taking nicknames based on physical appearance. As a man, Sweyn remained brash and colourful where his father was stern and authoritarian, and his evocative facial hair seemed an early reflection of this contrast. Around the same time, the Vikings, like Haakon of Norway and others under Harald's rule, shifted in their allegiance from one of support for the king to something more aloof. Harald's promotion of Christianity once again proving the point of contention with the highly paganistic order. Sweyn's relationship with Harald deteriorated in tandem with this simultaneous loss of support from Palnatoke. Sweyn won popularity by feats in raiding and fighting, hammering the English coast, and these combined with his attractive personality were a threatening mix, particularly when his father, the king, was in a highly vulnerable position. Eventually, in the middle of the 980s, Harald resolved that Sweyn would not inherit the throne or rule of Denmark, and this decision ignited a firestorm of conflict that would topple his near 3-decade reign. Alienating his son was a drastic mistake, for with the kingdom already sundered by religious strife, it was no hard task for Sweyn to garner support and draw in a range of allies for his claim to the throne. Unsurprisingly, given the rancor that Harald's religious upheaval had caused, one of the foremost pillars of Sweyn's support came from Palnatoke and the formidable Vikings. Sweyn openly revolted, and before long, his influence and combined forces were a match for those of Harald. Though now well into his 70s, Harald was still at heart the savage young Dane who had built his kingdom into a power capable of taking the field against the Holy Roman Empire, and he had no intention of allowing this domain to be torn out from underneath him. It's possible, even likely, that Harald had anticipated Sweyn's reaction and was attempting to flush out the malcontents. Harald drew together his own host, ships and men, all ready to fight on land or wave in the name of their rightful king. Though he lacked the strong arm of Palnatoke and the Vikings, Harald probably had the larger force when the two met, father and son deciding the victor in a fight that went against nature itself. In a fitting manner, the battle took place on the sea at the fjord of Isefjord, the body of water that lies within 2 arms on the north of the island of Zealand. Sweyn and his allies seem to have been searching the waves and learned of his father's presence there. And Sweyn commenced the fight by unceremoniously ramming directly into Harald's longship. The fighting was brutal. Missiles, javelins, and arrows flying through the air between the scores of vessels. Rowers heaved every ounce of effort to reach the speed necessary to ram the hull of an enemy, after which warriors would clamber over the shattered timbers and razor-sharp splinters, sword, axe, and shield in hand, closing to fight their stunned but equally belligerent opponents. The clash of the iron blades and thud of struck mail rang out over the wind and squall of the high seas. The battle was not over quickly. Men and ships ground up in the churning waves, with yet more replacing them as they fell. With the two fleets entangled and the howls of war being overcome by those of the wounded and dying, it appeared that the Bluetooth and his son had fought to a stalemate. But fate was not content to leave things in that way. Somewhere amidst the carnage and the ruin, rampage, bloodshed, and chaos, the elderly Harald Bluetooth found himself in the thick of the fray, and he was wounded, stabbed, struck, and slashed several times, only saved when his men managed to fight their way to his side and pull him to safety. When they put him onto a fresh longboat and rowed at full tilt from the fight, victory was handed to Sweyn. Harald's men did not stop until they had brought their stricken leader into exile, somewhere among the Slavs, where he eventually succumbed to his wounds. His body was returned to his native lands, to Roskilde, the city he had founded, and buried in the church he had built there. Sweyn, as the deceased king's son and victor by combat, was the only viable candidate for the vacant throne, and he was duly declared king of both Denmark and Norway. He was to rule without his mentor Palnatoke of the Joms Vikings. It's possible that the old warrior fell in the Battle of Isefjord, with one chronicler even telling the story that it was Palnatoke himself who brought down the Bluetooth with a well-placed arrow. Despite the loss of his ally, Sweyn's victory was complete, and he held a great feast to celebrate his succession. On taking his father's throne, he vowed to sail to England and kill King Ethelred himself. Clearly, his ambitions toward the Western Island nation would not be sated by mere raids and extortion. In the meantime, Sigvaldi Strut Haraldsson had become leader of the Joms Vikings, and he now made his own ambitious vow to take on the treacherous Håkon Sigurdsson and the breakaway territory in Vik. With around 60 ships transporting about 6,000 warriors, Sigvaldi sailed north, confident that his elite special forces would prevail over a common upstart. But the Bluetooth had chosen Håkon to govern Vik for his capabilities, and he mustered his own formidable force, allied with the Jarls of Led. When Sigvaldi arrived, Håkon could put double his number of ships to sea and man them with around 10,000 fighters. The resulting Battle of Hjørungavåg saw nature herself fight against the invaders, for as Sigvaldi's force descended on Håkon's fleet, a vicious hailstorm hit the faces of the Joms. The winds broke up the attackers' formations and allowed the larger Norwegian force to ride the breeze and shatter their fleet from all sides. The fighting when one ship boarded another was brutal as ever, bleeding and frozen hands clutching battle axes as icy sleet dripped from the fingers and mingled with the blood on the boards of the deck. The Joms Vikings were defeated, a significant blow to their reputation, as well as to that of Sweyn and his offensive power. 986 was to prove a year of mixed fortunes for the new Danish king. His success in winning the throne from his father had been offset by the failure to end Håkon's succession, and the usurper was now more secure than he had been before the battle. Sweyn's fortune seemed to rise, along with his prospects for founding a lasting legacy, when he secured a marriage with Gunhild of Venden, a Polish princess. Gunhild was to bear him 2 sons, Harald and Knut, both of whom seemed set to enjoy enduring triumphs given their lineage. The fragile status of his position continued in the early years of his reign, and Sweyn continued Harald's church-building policy in order to keep to the agreements made with the Holy Roman Empire. But he mitigated this necessity by softening the pressure on his subjects, and particularly the nobles, towards conversion. He also astutely identified a cause of great resentment, which was the German clergy that had been sent into the kingdom in the aftermath of Harald's conflicts with the emperor, and who now wielded significant political clout in addition to their religious influence. Instead, England, with a large population of Danes among its eastern reaches, provided him with a continuing pool of clergy who were familiar with both Christian and Danish culture. When Sweyn substituted Anglo-Danish clergy in place of the German priests, he found that friction was reduced substantially as a result. His attempt at a middle way in regard to religious matters was likely more successful domestically than with the foreigners, for a new coalition headed by Eric the Victorious of Sweden attacked and invaded Sweyn's territories in about 990. Eric was another warrior in the mold of Harald and Sweyn, and he had spent decades building up his territory from the smaller northern realm he had held at the outset of his reign, earning his sobriquet in the process. Eric and his allies swept down from the north, knocking Sweyn aside after several sea battles and forcing him to flee to foreign territories. Eric held significant parts of Denmark for some time, until his death in 995. And Sweyn was ready for the political turbulence that most assuredly followed. With Eric's court and heirs more concerned with matters in his Swedish realm, Sweyn arrived on the Danish shore with his longboats, gathering support and reclaiming his throne from the now isolated Swedish forces in a short amount of time. A new confidence appeared in the aftermath, with coins minted bearing Sweyn's name and clearly modelled on the coins of King Ethelred's kingdom across the North Sea. Sweyn's rise, fall and resurrection had been mesmeric, but the king was still young, and as the artwork from his mint proved, he still had ambitions beyond those of Jutland and its surrounding islands. He had seen firsthand the state of England and its weakened king, and a kingdom with the seemingly inexhaustible supply of Danegeld laid just across the water, waiting for a leader with the steel heart to take it.
If you stayed around this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment as a sacrifice to the algorithm. You can also support us on Patreon and get ad-free early access to our videos for as little as $1, or by clicking the thanks button below to leave a one-time tip. As always, we'll see you in the next one.